Today, Charles Oliveira is out of his championship fight with Islam Makhachev due to a cut. Enter the true BMF. Alexander Volkanovski will fly to Abu Dhabi and face Islam Makhachev for the lightweight championship of the world. And Edson Barbosa. Will his veteran status carry him to a win this weekend? Or will Sadiq Yusf place his name amongst the higher featherweights in his division? And the co-main event has Jennifer Maia in it. How do you feel about that? All of this and more in today's episode of Matter of Fact MMA. Let's go. Let's get to it. We're starting out at the top of the show. Before we get into this weekend's card, we're going to start with the breaking news that Charles Oliveira, in his final sparring session before he was about to fly to Abu Dhabi, got a crazy cut over the top of his eye. A crazy cut. They tried to go, they went, tried to fix it, tried to hide it, you know, so to speak, so he could fly over to Abu Dhabi. They were not able to do that. Charles Oliveira is out. Charlie Olives, my heart goes out to him. He is out of this fight and enter the real BMF. We're not worried about Justin Gaethje at the moment. And shout out to Justin Gaethje. Alexander Volkanovski steps in on 11 days' notice to face one of the pound-for-pound greats, Islam Makhachev, in Abu Dhabi for the lightweight championship of the world. Let's start out with this. So, personally, I don't really think that this changes the outcome of the fight too much. What am I saying? I'm saying that Volkanovski on short notice is going to fly from Australia to Abu Dhabi to face Islam Makhachev. You know, I'm sure that Volk is not in the tip-top best condition he would normally be in. He was just about to begin a training camp for Iliad Pereira. So I'm sure he's not, you know, I mean, Volk is the kind of guy that's always going to be training. He's always going to be in the gym regardless. But I'm sure that the next 11 days, a lot of it is going to be spent with him making weight. Now, he only has to make 155 pounds instead of 145. But still, I'm sure that the bulk of the next, 11 days, 10 or 11 days or so, are going to be spent in him trying to dial his weight down, not deplete himself, so to speak. I'm sure there's not a ton he has to cut, though, to make 155. But he's not in a full training camp for Islam Makhachev, nor does Pereira fight like Makhachev. With that being said, he's already stepped in the octagon with Makhachev once before, and a lot of people argue that he should have won that fight. I had Makhachev 3-2, but a lot of people feel that Volk should have won that. Nevertheless, in this rematch, I would have to lean toward Islam Makhachev at this moment. You know what I'm talking about? At this time. But by the time we actually approach that fight and fight week, things could be different. Simply because MMA, especially in the UFC, has been a wild roller coaster in 2023. So many people that you would consider to be the underdog, so many fighters that you would think, Izzy's going to wash Strickland. You know what I mean? In the rematch against Pereira, Pereira's going to wash Izzy. And we were shocked in the outcomes of these fights. So with that being said, at this time, I'm going to lean toward Makhachev. But as we get closer to that fight week, to that fight, everything might change. Because this has been a wild and crazy year for mixed martial arts, especially in the UFC. So it would be a crazy, wild story if a man was able to go in and beat Islam Makhachev on short notice, on 11 days' notice, up a weight division, and it's Alexander Volkanovski. So I just had to react to that real quick because that's crazy, bro. Nevertheless, I feel bad for Charles Oliveira because there's no guarantee now that he's going to get his title shot in the next fight. More than likely, when you make Dana White mad, he probably won't get the title shot in his next fight. He'll probably have to beat somebody else, and then he'll get the title shot. And we don't know where Islam Makhachev is going to go. Let's say he beats Volk. We don't know what he's going to do after that. I mean, he's chirping at Kobe Covington. It seems like he wants to move up to 170 and fight for that championship. So I don't know how it's all going to play out for the 155-pound division and for Charles Oliveira. So, shout out to Charlie Olives. He'll up. Hopefully, they're still going to give him a title fight at some point. Let's switch gears. Let's go ahead. We're going to move into this weekend's card, where in the main event, Edson Barbosa is going to step in there with Sodiq Yusf at featherweight in a 5-round bout. Let's talk about this real quick. This one's kind of hard to call because a lot of the time when you see in these fights, you see the younger fighter, the more up-and-coming fighter stepping in there with the old veteran. That could really play out any number of ways. You could see Edson Barbosa go in there, use his, his veteran abilities. He's fought a who's who of all the greats, including Khabib Nurmagomedov. So, you could really see him go out there and pull something out. However, you get these young and up-and-comers like Sodiq Yusf, and we think we have an idea of how Sodiq Yusf fights, but you never really know. He's been off for a year. He had an injury. I'm sure he's been working out. I'm sure he's been training. I'm sure he's probably added a few new wrinkles to his game. So you may see him go out there and style on Edson Barbosa. It's really hard to call how that fight is going to go. I believe Barbosa in his prime would easily defeat Sodiq Yusf, but his prime days are definitely behind him. Although he's still chasing a shot at featherweight at the championship. And I don't know if he'll ever get that. But Barbosa is still out there, still doing his thing. So, one thing that you can't ignore is a lot of the times, even with fights that Barbosa wins, he definitely eats a lot of shots. He gets pieced up a lot. So, it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't really know which way I'm going to lean here, honestly, because it's hard to tell with these vets. It's hard to tell if they're going to really go out there and be able to, pull out a gut out a win, or, you just don't really know what's going to happen. So I'm going to stay away from this main event. If I was going to lean either way, I would think that even on his worst day, Barbosa could defeat Sodiq Yusf, but I'm not really sure. Let's move on to the co-main event, in which is what as I check my Nizzos. The co-main event, Jennifer Maia steps in there against Viviane Araújo. Is this really a good co-main event? No disrespect to these two women. It's not what you typically think of as a co-main event. But last week we just saw Joe Pyfer in a main event, a co-main event. Not to knock Joe Pyfer, but the sport's changing. There's so many cards out there, They got to fit these fights in where they can, and sometimes you end up being the co-main event. Nevertheless, I'm going to lean toward Jennifer Maia in this fight. Her boxing looked stellar in her last bout. She looked a lot sharper on the feet. She already had the grappling, the wrestling, and the ground skills, but now she's added in that really crisp boxing. So I'm going to lean toward her in that bout to go out there and beat Viviane Araújo. Let's move on. We got Jonathan Martinez stepping in there against Adrian Yanez. This is a tough one to call. I'm going to lean toward Adrian Yanez. I believe that he definitely has the sharper boxing, the sharper stand-up than Jonathan Martinez. Jonathan Martinez constantly has that submission threat, has that ground threat, and he definitely is good on the feet. But I think that at times, Jonathan Martinez seems to me that he might struggle with his self-confidence in a fight. And so I don't get the vibe that Yanez ever struggles with that. So I'm going to lean more toward him because I think both of their skill sets kind of offset each other. And so when the skill sets offset each other, you got to reach down deep in that bag, in that purse, in that pocketbook. You know what I'm saying? If you're from the South, and you got to pull out an extra, intangible. And in that, I'm going to lean more toward Adrian Yanez in this fight. Let's move on. Andre Petroski stepping in there against the wild man, Michel Pereira. This should be a good fight. You know what I'm saying? This should be a good fight because anytime Michel Pereira is fighting, it's action television. It's prime time hour. You got to see it. You don't know what this guy's going to do. He might do backflips down the aisle and gas out. He might do a front flip into the cage, do a dance and gas out. He might begin the first round, knock his opponent down, and do a backflip stomp, aiming for the chest, might miss, hit him in the head, and get DQ'd. You don't know what's going to happen with Michel Pereira. You just don't know. Petroski, I like him as a fighter. Petroski, he's a good grappler. Of course, he's a wrestler and he's a grappler. But he just swings like this man, the way he throws his shots when he's standing. He puts all of his power into it. A lot of the time he wildly misses, but if he connects, somebody's going down, and you could definitely have a club and sub type deal going on with him. So, this is definitely going to be a good fight. I'm going to go ahead and give Michel Pereira the edge on this. I know he's the favorite going into it, but it wouldn't shock me if Petroski, if Michel Pereira goes out there and gasses himself out, doing his wild, crazy, extra movement that he constantly does, then I would say Petroski's going to take him down, smother him for the 3 rounds, and end up winning by decision. But that's only if Michel Pereira gets tired. If Michel Pereira does not get tired, and he's able to go out there and, fight in a pretty strategic manner, which that's crazy to say, Michel Pereira fighting strategically. But if he's able to do that, then I would definitely lean towards him to get this win. Edgar Chairez steps in there against Daniel Lacerda. Daniel Lacerda still out there, still kicking. So many times we're looking like, man, how is the UFC going to give him his walking papers yet? You know what I'm saying? He definitely has had quite a few losses, but he's still here. He's still in the company, still in the division, stepping in there against Edgar Chairez. I got to give I got to give it to Edgar. I mean, this dude, his stand-up looks so good. So, I just feel like he's going to piece him up on the feet and finish him. Let's move on. We got Christian Rodriguez stepping there against Cameron Simon. I got to go along with Cameron Simon. I believe that on the feet, Cameron Simon definitely has a slight advantage at least, but maybe more than slight. And on the ground, Simon is no joke either. Now, I will say Christian Rodriguez, he just gutted out a win in his last fight, kind of put them man hands, so to speak, paws on his opponent. You know what I'm saying? But I'm still gonna lean toward Cameron Simon to get this one done. Let's move on. We got Darren Elkins, the Damage, stepping in there against TJ Brown. This one's a toss-up because I don't think that TJ Brown is the best fighter. His last fight, he did show us a couple new wrinkles, so to speak, but I don't think he's the best fighter. Darren Elkins is definitely on the latter end of his career. Each time he goes out there, he speaks about this might be his last time. So I don't know if he's spoken about this could be his last fight, but I'm just going to go wild with it. I'm going to go with Darren Elkins. I definitely think he's, that man is tough. He's old shoe leather tough, if you know this saying. So, his fighting style is bowling shoe ugly, if you know that saying. So it's like, I'm going to lean more towards him. I think TJ Brown is a competent fighter, but I just don't trust the man at all. And I'd rather just trust Darren Elkins to go out there and get the job done. So I'm leaning towards him. Let's see. We have, I'm sorry if I'm going to butcher these names. We have Tenera Lisboa versus Ravina Oliveira. I don't really have a pick in this fight. I don't know enough about these two women to really pick in this one. Just off the top of my head, I probably would lean toward Lisboa. I think she might, I don't know. I don't really know a ton about these women to really make a pick here. I'm just going to go out on the limb. I'm going to flip a coin like the MMA guru, and I'm going to go along with Lisboa in this one. Let's move on. Terrence McKinney on here against Brendan Marote? I'm sorry, sir, if I mispronounce your last name. I'm going to go along with Terrence McKinney. The way that I see it, the UFC really sees something in Terrence McKinney. I don't think that they necessarily see championship material, but I believe they see something in him because his last fight and this fight, to me, spell get back. Both of them spell, we need to get him out there, get him a couple of wins, and get him back in the heavy rotation in the division. So I'm going to lean toward Terrence McKinney. Then we got Irina Alexieva. I probably butchered that. Let's call her the Russian Ronda. Stepping in there against Melissa Dixon. I don't know anything about Melissa Dixon, so I'm going to lean toward the Russian Ronda because her nickname is the Russian Ronda Rousey, and that's kind of neat, I guess, kind of cool. I don't know. We're going to lean toward her. Her last fight, she shocked everyone when she pulled off the win, so let's see if she can do it again. Let's move on. We got Chris Gutierrez, who was supposed to fight last week, stepping in there against, oh, Lord, this is going to be a rough one. Let's just call him Mr. A. You know what I'm saying? We're going to call him Mr. A. Chris Gutierrez stepping in there against Mr. A. Look, I know, shout out to this man if he's able to win. I feel sorry for this man. I don't know this man. So we're going to lean toward Chris Gutierrez to go out there and get the win on short notice. He was already in the camp. He was supposed to fight last week. Now he's back this week. He's got an easier opponent. He should go out there and do work. Shout out to Mr. A. I apologize, sir. And then finally, in the opening bout of the night, we got Ashley Yoder stepping in there, the Spider Monkey, against Emily Ducote. I got Emily Ducote all day. Shout out to Ashley Yoder, still around, still doing her thing. But, she's from Ultimate Fighter fame, so to speak. But I'm still going to lean toward Emily Ducote. So that's what we got going on. That's going down this week. UFC, I believe this fight is in the Apex. It's going down. In the main event, Sadiq Yusf steps in there with Edson Barbosa. But the real flashpoint of everything right now in the UFC is the BMF, the true BMF. Alexander Volkanovski will step in there on 11 days' notice against Islam Makhachev for the lightweight championship. That's what I'm talking about. Volkanovski, that's what I'm talking about. Nevertheless, I appreciate you guys for joining me for another episode of Matter of Fact MMA. And I'll check you next time. Peace.